question for Mr. Fisher and Mr. Zaid. Back in the 80s in Jeddah, if I wanted a best superhero experience, I would get it from a comic. After that, from an animated series. And last would be Spider-Man, which would be on an Atari game. Have we reached a juncture now that the best superhero storytelling experience is going to come from gaming rather than animation? And Mr. Zaid, you've been involved with Hitmonkey and MODOK, but also live action like The Defenders and Legion. Can we expect you to be doing something like Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, that you would be producing or directing a video game for Marvel fans?
These days, because the box office is not as good as they thought, and people have to be laid off. Animation and video games are often seen as like two of the continued growth vehicles. So that's why we brought on some gurus, some experts to tell us a little bit about those industries and experiences in them. We're starting off with Mike Fisher. He's professor of engineering at the University of Southern California. He's worked in gaming, for such companies as Microsoft, Square Enix America, where he served as CEO, and some of the big titles that you might have heard that he's worked on include Sonic the Hedgehog, Halo, and Tomb Raider. I see some smiling faces there. Next, we have Ahmed Hamouda. He's the co-founder and head of story for Geographics. It's an animation studio, and you might know his work on such films as The Grand Knight, or on the anthology series from Disney in Africa, Hisashi Moto. If you do not know it, you'll find out more from him later today. Next up, we have Cynthia Sharaya. Cynthia is the founder of Digitales with her husband, and you might know her from such YouTube series as Our Family Life. And she just had her first 3D animation feature called Salim screening at Annecy this year. So she adds another voice to our panel and an important female voice.
And here.
Oh yeah, it's screening here as well, of course. So. Last but not least, we have Karim Srek coming to stage. He's the founder and president of Cemetery Productions. The company has an overall deal of Amazon, so he's developing various projects for them. But you might also know some of the animated series he's done. Among them is Hitmonkey, which is voiced by Jason Sudeikis, also one of the fun ones. I thought I'll open up the question today with a basic question about animation. When I talk to my friends, especially friends with kids, they always say, everybody loves animation. And I saw a lot of people smiling when I mentioned some of the projects here on stage. Animation always seems to excite people. But is it as easy as it seems? Some of my friends will say, well, animation is always easy. I say, there's so much hard work going into it, and you can probably tell if animation is not good. So tell us a little bit what the magic ingredients are to make animation as magical as it can be. Cynthia, do you want to start maybe?
Yeah, I think it is the word magical, actually. That's the key word. And I think animation sparks imagination for all ages. The creativity and the potential and the imaginary world that you live in an animated feature or animated series is amazing. There's a lot more you can do, I think, in animation than in live action. And I think as well, also the universal themes that you can also tackle in animated films and animated series. Also there's this nostalgic feeling, I think, that animation sparks in our emotions. And for instance, in the film Salim, we have deliberately created the world of Salim as in the 90s. Because we wanted to spark this nostalgic feeling for parents who watch with their children so that we can have a great experience for both the children and the parents. And there's something else also. I always say that animation is disarming. It breaks boundaries. So yeah, I think this is my take on it.
Ahmed, what's your take on, when you work, what do you look for? What's really important for you?
When you asked that question, I remember the quote by Walt Disney. He said that I don't do animation films for children. I make animation films not primarily for children. I make them for the child inside of everyone, whether they are 6 or 60. So this is what I believe unique about animation, that every one of us, when we watch an animation movie, we just get connected to the child inside of us. So, and it has different layers. So taking The Lion King, for example, and if you go with your child, because of The Lion King, it's 1993, I was 3 years old, and it's the first movie I watched in cinema. I remember how touching that was for me, and I remember that I wanted Simba to win over Scar. When I grow up and I start to find different layers, there's Hakuna Matata, how to deal with the past. And there's Rafiki who comes and tell you how the past affects you and how to get rid of that. So there is different layers, and this is the smart thing about this good screenplay, that you can write a screenplay. If you only think about the child, you will have a very rough layer that only scratches the surface of something, but you can get into deeper levels so that the whole family can watch it, and everyone will comprehend a different layer. This is what I find unique about animation. Me and my wife, when we decide to watch an animation movie tonight, this is a good night for me, because I know that the child inside of me will be activated, and this is how I see it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear this perspective. There's been a term in the States regarding animation that's come up a lot, especially on the TV side, which is the phrase adult animation, right? Which is edgier content, and I haven't heard that word used here yet in the region. But it's in the States, it's our way to sort of say, we're gonna push the tone and the content of what we show you, and that mostly lives in television, right? So during my time at Marvel, we produced 2 animated series, MODOK and Hit Monkey, that were very edgy, a little violent and pushed a little bit, and the phrase was coined adult animation, and now that's what you're seeing a lot of. A lot of these networks and streamers are pushing into adult animation. To hear you guys talk about, well, we like the roots of animation and where it started from, I love hearing that, because you have to stay true to that. Somewhere in the middle is where all of animation can live, right? And that's what's so impressive about the genre right now, is you can do so much. It's uncharted territory right now.
That's great. And now, Mike, you have some experience taking some animated characters to the big screen, a film. Talk a little bit about how easy it is to do that, because I know that there's so many people passionate about characters, which is great because you get to maybe show them on a different platform. At the same time, there's probably the risk that you disappoint some of those fans and saying, "Oh, this is not what I wanted to see." Talk a little bit about this, please.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting, having worked in video games for over 30 years, and now seeing it truly reach sort of mainstream breakout appeal. The opportunity is a strategy that we had at Microsoft called grab the core and go for more. From a generational standpoint, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was built on a fan base that grew up reading comic books. This next generation grew up playing video games. So they're looking for interpretations of those video game experiences that they had as a child. We're even now seeing 2 generations who are now playing video games with their kids. So there's an incredible opportunity for animation to build on that story in those worlds, and then also build on that user base. The challenge is, it's an incredibly passionate audience, and if you don't stay authentic to them, they will come back at you with a vengeance, because they are very active on social media and their memes are merciless. So to give you an example, I don't know if you can cue up the photo that I prepared, but so I worked on the original Sonic the Hedgehog back in the 90s. I wasn't part of this project, but I friends of mine still at Sega were. And what happened was, as the Sonic the Hedgehog movie was getting ready to come out, they released the image of the main character, of Sonic. The fans hated it, and went crazy on it. The studio spent an extra 5 months in production. They delayed it, an extra $5 million rebuilding the model to stay authentic to the fans. So as a result, they immediately had a fan base that was actively promoting this. But what was exciting was, there was a generation that grew up playing Sonic the Hedgehog in the 90s, or their parents now. This was introduced to their kids. It became a hit movie, but these kids didn't realize that it was a game. So then we actually went backwards. They made a free version of the game on Roblox to reintroduce Sonic to a new generation of kids. And then those kids went on to watch the TV series on Netflix. So there's this incredible virtuous cycle that came from that. So, and I would say that the least successful video game adaptation I ever did was one where we brought out the animation and the video game on the same day, because there was no audience there. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dragon Prince from on the Netflix series. They started developing the video game and the TV series, the animated series, at the same time, but they're letting 3-4 seasons go by on Netflix before they introduce the game. So you can start with the game and go to the movie, or from the movie to the game, but that authenticity is a double-edged sword.
Thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things I was wondering about, we talked about known franchises. How easy or difficult is it in animation to come up with original new concepts? And what's kind of the traditional hesitancy to go with one? You know, is it something that automatically does better with built-in characters? Everybody knows Mickey Mouse, so we do more Mickey Mouse. Well, how important is it to also bring the original creations?
I haven't experienced, it's not complete yet, in the Grand Night. The Grand Night is based in a very famous Egyptian operetta that was made in the 60s. And I was connected to it because my grandfather and my uncle, they used to sing it to me. So when we decided to do our first animation movie, we decided to work on the Grand Night because this was the thing that they had. It has a lot of fantasy and it has a lot of philosophy. It was a movie that I would love to tell. And it got the fund from the Red Sea this round. Thank you for that. But when we started, I was the one who's telling the writers, guys, we have to stick to every character, we have to stick to everything that is there. And we kept writing the drafts for we wrote till this moment around 25 drafts. And it never worked until we decided that we're not here to tell the stories of our grandparents, we're here to tell what we learned from them. And we're here to tell our story instead of their story. So making a new franchise or making a new movie based on characters of your imagination, the writing will be easier, selling it will be hard, but making a movie based on something, there is a balance that you always have to find, because as Mike said, if you don't respect the original artwork, the people who love it will just get you on the social media platforms and destroy everything that you're doing. But if you don't find yourself inside of that, you'll be telling a story that is not yours. So there is a balance, and we're still learning how to do it, but it's just a process that we're learning right now.
Well, we own 2 IPs that were created from scratch, our original content. And one of them is a YouTube series, a viral YouTube series actually, with more than 1 billion views organic, and more than 2 million subscribers on YouTube, which is our Family Life. It's a much loved family series in the Arab world. And we started this project by creating 1 short film. We tested it with 1 short clip. We put it on YouTube, and we saw how people interacted with the characters and how they interacted with the story. And it worked really well. So we decided to take this short film and create a series out of this film. And it's a success story right now. With Celine, we also created the characters and the story as original, local. But a lot goes into that process of creating original characters and original story, I think. There's a lot of research that needs to be done, from all aspects of the creative process and all aspects of the writing process. So our film focuses on mental health. So we have put in psychologists within the writing room that we use. We always use a writing room in our process. So we've put in, psychologists to be part of the process. The producers were part of that process. The director was part of that process. So there's a lot of work that goes into, and research and hard work that goes into creating original IP, I think. But it's worth it because you're creating something new. I mean, it's worth it, I think. And we hope that, of course, it's risky. It's always risky, but I think it's worth it, especially for our region.
Can I just say, how inspiring it is to hear the way that you're using YouTube? So you don't have to negotiate with the network. You're not getting notes back from somebody to tell you how to change it. You can do it your way, and you're reaching billions of people around the world without any intermediary.
We've actually used the community of YouTube for questions related to our new IP.
Because it's a two-way discussion, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've asked them questions about the title or the type of characters they want to see, or so it's amazing. It's great.
It's very successful. The series that you're speaking about is very successful. It got millions of views. If you just check, I'd love if you said, it's called The Red Eye.
As a consumer, I love it because I'm so frustrated right now. I'm subscribed to Netflix, and then the show I want is on Hulu. I subscribe to Hulu, right? So you're putting it on YouTube. It's accessible to everyone around the world with the internet connection. So there's a democratization about it that I think is also really inspiring.
And I think as new, it puts. I was talking to him about this while ago. It builds your ground, as local producers working independently. It puts your name out there. So you have to start with something that creates a name for yourself.
Sounds great. I'm curious, I sometimes wonder how much global opportunity there is for projects like yours, Cynthia, Ahmed, and Karim, you have a little bit of experience bringing animation projects to the world, or selling them. How limited is it usually in terms of storytelling, or how global can it be? Because I always feel the visuals make it very global, but it's how do you make the story global or universal enough?
It's such a good question, and I think the answer applies to both live action and animation, right? If we're going to do I'm going to call it domestic, United States and international, or the region we're in now, how do you get stories that work on both sides? And whether it's animation, live action, video games, there needs to be a universal appeal, right? I sat on a panel a couple days ago here and said, a story about a wedding has universal appeal, right? It connects. So being able to watch a movie like Celine, someone in Los Angeles goes, I relate, I understand that character. I think you've hit the benchmark. It's finding those stories, and that's why it's always encouraging. I like to encourage young writers, especially here in this region, to find that universal appeal. And I know the instinct is always write what you know, but to make it sellable and to monetize, find the global appeal.
Absolutely, I totally agree with this, because while creating Salim, we did our research. As I said, we talked to psychologists. We went into the mind of children who are impacted by toxic stress or traumatic experiences. That's a worldwide thing. That's not just, it's not a regional story, it's a worldwide story. And we went to the mind of the child and we studied the emotions, even the facial expressions, the body movements, the reactions, and those are universal. So when you put them in your film, you instantly connect to a global audience, I think. And so we created Salim with the global audience. It's a Middle Eastern story, but we created it with a global audience in mind.
I was going to say, video games, I get a little bit of a pass on this because any global video game has to go through a global regional culture check before it's released. And that's a result of some really badly handled cultural blunders. Where there was one time at Microsoft where someone put in the Muslim call to prayer as a music sampled in a fighting game. It was really bad. And Microsoft recalled every single copy of that game from around the world and destroyed it because they took the issue so seriously. It was just a developer who was stupid. But as a result, we'll never make a mistake like that again. So they go through that check. But to give a sense of how global games are in terms of their reach, Barbie, I think is going to do about $1.5 billion in box office this year. Fortnite's doing $4 billion this year.
Yes.
It did $4 billion last year. It did probably $5 billion before that. And it's going to do $4 to $5 billion a year for another 5 or 6 years. 46 million people played Game of Fortnite on the same day last month. So you're tapping into a huge global audience. But it also means that the stakes are higher. So there's now an entire industry of specialists who review every aspect of the game to make sure that there's not any kind of cultural insensitivity that happens.
Mike, can I get a question? Those numbers are fascinating. They're incredible. When it comes to gaming, are gamers running to theaters to watch movies, or are they loyal to their game and console?
I think first of all, there's an enormous amount of multitasking that's happening, and the video gamers are huge media consumers. The biggest challenge that we're having in gaming right now is TikTok. Because the average TikTok user is spending 90 minutes a day on TikTok. And that time is coming out of video games right now. So we have no problem with any other form of linear entertainment, but TikTok, especially for mobile games, it's created a lot of economic challenges. Less so for the high-end console and PC games. But yes, there's a lot of affinity, and that's why you see now the Halo Live series, as well as a lot of other animated programs. I'm very excited about the Fallout program on Amazon that's coming out soon. So I think there's a lot of, they're heavy media consumers. And in fact, one of the biggest outlets for movie advertising are the websites based on video games. So if you go to a video gaming website like IGN, the ads are probably 60% movie releases now.
Now, I wanted to ask, there's so much creativity in the region. Like just walking the hallways this week, I hear so many people who want to create something and develop their ideas. Is there a growing production industry in the region or in Saudi Arabia for video games and for animation? Or how does this usually get done? Ahmed, you do this with a lot of other people, or is it just basically your company? How big is this as an industry right now, and how do you see this growing in the coming years?
It's fresh, it's starting now, and there is a lot of movement that's happening. So you find tens of companies around the Arab world that are trying. So yesterday I had a coffee with Cynthia and Shadi, and we kept discussing the challenges that we see here in the market, and we kept sharing our journey and sharing our values, and as if we're continuing the story of each other, because the same thing is happening to each of us. And the reality of the opportunity that lies here happen to be the amount of stories that you can find in this region. Because I believe if there's a land of tales, it will be around this area. Because, for example, in Egypt you find stories that are 7,000 years ago. They are carved on the temples. And here there is a story that I'm fascinated with. I'm not ready to do an animation movie yet, but it's called Sirat al-Hilali. It's a biology for someone called Abu Zaid al-Hilali. And this story, it was for someone who was born here in Najd is in Saudi Arabia right now, like 10 centuries ago. And then his story, he started to have a lot of battles and heroic actions, and this was very inspiring to Egyptian storytellers. So it started by telling this stories here in Saudi Arabia or here in Najd, and these stories started to move to Egyptian storytellers. And then every storyteller, they add from their, it starts to be fiction. They started to add from their own experience to this story, and then their grandchildren, they come and tell the story another round. So after 10 centuries, no one has written this story. It's just a story that was written for 10 centuries until someone came like 50 years ago and decided to archive all of that. So when I read this, or when I'm listening to it, because it's always like songs or something like that. It's a story that was written for 10 centuries, and this is one story of multiple stories. So this is the heritage that we carry, and if now if we're pitching, and everyone is asking if you're doing an adaptation from a novel or a graphic novel or a comic book, and we have a lot of novels that we've never seen the screen. My favorite novelist, his name is Naguib Mahfouz. He won the Nobel Prize. I'm sure a lot of people know Naguib Mahfouz. The amount of imagination that he has, the amount of stories that we can take from that, and this is one novelist again. In the whole Arabic Peninsula, when like 14 centuries ago, the poetry and the poets that was there, we still listen to their poets. So we are a generation that's coming that wants to show these stories to the world, but we're coming after a generation and multiple generations of storytellers who were very tactful and they knew how to carry these stories. So there is a lot of opportunities in terms of stories, and we're just trying to see what gap that we can fill.
I think I agree that there's a lot of rich heritage in the region and a lot of stories that are untold and need to be told. The thing is that when our region is portrayed in films, especially in animation, it's usually historic stories or very romanticized stories that it's a projection of what the West sees in our culture, but it's not really authentic stories. And they don't
Can you give us an example, for example?
for instance, Aladdin,
Right.
right? So this is it's beautiful, but it's romanticized. It's not.
Wait, Aladdin's not real?
Well, it's a lens. It has its place, of course. It has its audience, of course, and we are audience of that story as well. But there is another lens that needs to be also portrayed. There's another lens that needs to be told, and it's tricky. But because we are prone to tell historic stories based on historic facts, and that look like at the end they look like documentary films. There's no emotions. They don't appeal to global audience, and it's tricky, you know. But I think there's a lot of creativity also in the region where you can bring those stories and make them emotional, make them connect with global audience, and have a current or have them relevant to the current or modern times. So this is the missing link. But I think we have a lot of talent that can work on these adaptations of historic stories. And there's a lot of modern stories as well that needs to be told. The culture of the Middle East is not one culture. You know, there are multiple cultures, multiple layers. There's a lot of diversity and a lot of stories, a lot of minorities as well. Their stories also can make it to the screen. You know, it's an untapped word, I think.
Sounds good. Now, Mike, do you hear much about video game development companies in the region? What do you think about in terms of that growing at this stage?
It's an incredibly positive story. I think in large part because the leadership in Saudi Arabia is young. They understand the impact and the potential of video games, not only in terms of the economic development, like the revenue numbers that we talked about, but also as a way to tell your own story. And so there is an incredible level of investment from high-end acquisition of video game companies from the Public Investment Fund, all the way down to investment in education, incubation, and publishing video games here. What's really remarkable is how much talent there is. I was here in September for 2 weeks hosting some seminars and workshops for young video game developers, and I saw incredible, inspiring games. And I snuck away to Comic-Con on Sunday and saw even more games. So there's incredible talent, there's amazing resources and leadership that's behind it. So in that respect, I think Saudi Arabia is in front of any other country in the world as far as smart development of what they're doing. So I'm very excited to see what happens. Not only tapping into the rich history, but like you said, I would just see the stories about Saudi cyberpunk, Saudi science fiction, Saudi fantasy stories. That's really, really inspiring.
That's interesting. Corinne, would you consider maybe doing co-productions in animation ever with international partners, or is animation a thing where co-productions are harder to do?
No, I'm definitely open to it, absolutely. But one thing I wanted to circle back on,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
which is fantastic, is the topic of IP is it's a hot topic right now, right? And if you want to sell a project, there's no IP behind it. Can you sell it? What she said about creating your own IP is brilliant, and there are different avenues of doing that. Whether you have a story that you release online as a graphic novel, or you put it on YouTube, get some followers, and then now you have created the IP, which you turn into an animated series, a series, whatever you want. I think that's something that needs to be looked at and explored in this region, and not just feel like we don't have access to the IP or we can't get to the IP, but create it, self-create it, and go from there.
Since we're talking about IP, I was curious. Generative AI has been such a big topic, in Hollywood and beyond. Tell me a little bit about, is this something
That's
that you
my
spend
creative
much
Mike's behind it.
Sorry. Do you spend much time thinking about it, worrying about it? What's your take on it?
It's really mixed because I'm also seeing, I do a lot of work with the startup and investment community, and I'm seeing so many bad Web3 and metaverse concepts that they just scratch that out and write generative AI. So there's like a lot of static you have to filter out. But I think ultimately it's going to be not a replacement for creatives, but a force multiplier. So imagine how hard it is to make 3D art. But you can now create a 2D image and it'll make it 3D for you. So I don't think it's going to replace anybody. Somebody said this, AI is not going to replace your job. Another creator using AI is going to replace your job. So I really see it as part of the democratization of creation. Animation in particular, with so many new technologies, allows even with single creator to do what in the past needed an entire studio to do. And I mean, as we were talking about earlier, the opportunity in Africa to let these creative voices finally be heard. And then, like you said, to use YouTube as a way to distribute it. Generative AI is just part of that, and I think it's a wonderful tool. There will be some disruption, for sure. I think artists and animators, that part that they do will become less labor intensive. But I think rather than just eliminating jobs, it will allow them to do even more and create more content.
I'm excited actually about it because we'll be able to do more.
Yeah.
With less time and less effort.
The way I see it through Toy Story, the 1995, when it was the CG movie, and then after 10 years or something like that, most of them started to be 3D and CG. And the 2D artists, they started to shift into doing 3D work. And some of the 2D artists and directors, they didn't adapt to this change,
Exactly.
so they didn't find themselves in the market. I believe that we are at this moment in a new transition in the industry. Whoever will make the AI enemy for them, they will not find the space in the because it is an opportunity after all to have, like you said, the democratization of art. So now, right now, making a movie will be easier for everyone. The budgets will be less, so you'll find new voices and you'll find a lot of people from Africa that are ready to do that.
I have a question. The issue, that's a question that goes inside our company as well. The issue of intellectual property and the legal aspect of using generative AI and all these things. How do you see this?
I think, again, if you're just using it to say, give me art in the style of Miyazaki, you're in trouble. but again, the idea of just, again, creating your own 2D art and having that generate 3D will be great. So I think it's good that you're not allowing pure AI-generated content to be copyrighted. But I think it's gonna be a long path before we iron out all those wrinkles. But when I teach at USC, the first thing I always say to my students is learn how to protect your IP. We have 500 people in our video game division. We have 5,000 people in the business school studying how to take away your
I was wondering, can you guys share a little bit what some of the common misconceptions are about your work. You know, did you ever hear anybody talk about animation or gaming, and you say, "Oh my God, people always think it's like this." Because I know with my work they always say, "Oh, you're sitting in the sun, drinking some nice juice, and then you sit down and you think, and then you type a few words, and then you're done for the day." I'm like, no, usually it's not quite as relaxing as this. What are some of the common things that people misunderstand about animation that you want to clear up or help people understand better?
You know, the idea, when I went to my family and told them I'm doing a movie about Like Air Night, and then after 5 years of telling them I'm still doing a movie about Like Air Night, you don't believe it, we're doing animation, it's a children's drawing, why don't you finish it? So I believe that animation, like fishing, you know, it teaches you how to be patient. You know?
That's great.
I think also the amount of time and effort and layers and amount of people involved in the process, that's always surprising to people. And the complexity of the work itself. I mean, it's not just, as you said, someone with a pen and paper, like, drawing something. And it's an animated series or film. Yeah.
From a producing standpoint, it's always having to explain, or when you're trying to sell a project, walk everyone through why this project is suited for animation. Like, why are you choosing animation? Why are you choosing to go this way? What's the creative take? Why can't you do it live action, right? And there's a lot of preparation and storyboarding and the writer making his or her passionate plea for it, but there's a lot of legwork and preparation that needs to be done before you even get to the "we've sold it" stage. So that's a big misconception.
Are there any famous movies where you say, "Oh, I would love to see an animation version of this"?
Look, the one thing I can touch upon is my experience at Marvel, right? When Into the Spider-Verse was released, and that was an animated feature with a diverse character that not a lot of people had heard about. That was a risk, and they did it, and they delivered it, and they delivered an animation style that we weren't accustomed to. It set itself apart a little bit. But it was, from a Marvel standpoint, so refreshing to see a unique take on a character be put out and be introduced to the world via animation. It was amazing.
I think I would add to that as well, is that the process of animation needs very strong leadership and the right team as well. So it's a big process. It's not easy to keep your team for the span of 5 years, keep them motivated and have the right leadership and the right, controlling the budget, I don't have to deal with this. This is Shandy's as a producer. I'm happy I don't have to deal with this, but it's a lot of work also on the producing side, not just the creative side.
Now, what were some of the early projects that inspired you to become active in animation? Was there anything that you ever saw as a kid and said, "Oh, this is what I want to do later on. This is my calling"?
Well, I was going to say Aladdin, but she. No, I'm kidding.
As a child, I remember myself coming back from school, running to the TV, putting on to watch all the animated series that I watched, one after the other. It was television back then, and I used to watch something called Bello Sebastian. I don't know if anyone here who watched Bello Sebastian. I love Bello Sebastian. Bello Sebastian, and I used to imagine myself part of those stories. I always used to pick a character in the story that represents me, and I used to imagine myself as part of the story. So I think these films did make the difference.
That's nice.
Yeah, Toy Story, I still have my Woody. I wanted to bring him my niece to just took it from me. So I still have. I still love these characters, and I feel there's a lot of things that I've learned from the Hakuna Matata philosophy, and it just come to me in my life when I'm adult and I'm finding a past or something that I'm not proud about that I did, and then you start to remember something that you learned from your childhood, and it just stayed and remained. So I think they inspired me because I believe there's a lot of philosophy again in what my grandfather told me before he passed away, and his philosophy. It has a lot of stuff that I would love to share with the whole world, and this is when we got the chance to tell some stories on Disney Plus. I'm very excited that we put some of what we learned and what we know in front of everyone to watch. So yes, it was inspiring.
Mike, was there a game that made you think?
I've been in love with games since Pong, and I wrote my senior thesis in college in 1988 on forecasting revenue in the games industry. So this is all I've ever wanted to do. But in terms of animation, I lived in Japan for 10 years, and it was inspiring for me to see how much anime is treated as mainstream adult entertainment. But if you scratch any video game industry person, they'll always tell you Space Battleship Yamato was the one that we all love it. It's the one thing we all have in common. And it was a Star Wars-y story that actually came out before Star Wars. But I think for a lot of my generation, that was the first animation that showed us it's not just Scooby-Doo cartoons anymore. It's more than that.
Nice. Kareem, anything else from you?
I have nothing to add. This panel was brilliant. Yeah.
We'll go to questions in a little bit. I have one more question around before that, and then we'll start taking questions. I wanted to ask, we talked so much about the opportunities. What is the biggest challenge to your business at this stage? Maybe we start with animation, and then we move to language.
I think the biggest challenge right now is, of course, funding is always a challenge. Finding the right professional talent to work on the IPs are also a challenge. What we did is we worked with our local talent, but we know our weaknesses. So we did collaborate with an international team of freelancers. We had over 100 professionals and artists from all around the world work on Serene. The creative direction was in-house, because all the decisions were made in-house and they were managed internally. But they worked on the animation process together with our local team. So they were also trained by them. We had a great chance to also work with Disney veterans like Tom Bancroft and Bob Corley. They worked with us on the film. So there are opportunities, but what I want to say is that you can turn those challenges into opportunities. We did work most of the film during COVID, so everybody was online. We did not stop. We moved all our work remotely, and this gave us the chance to work with people like Tom and Bob and Nikki and all these things. I think these are the most challenges.
Yeah, the challenges are the same as the opportunities. The whole ecosystem for animation, it is still needs a lot of development. So if there is a support for the gaming industry that's happening, we don't have the same support for the animation yet, although there's a lot of kids and a lot of content that they need. So I believe it's a matter of time until you start to find the ecosystem building itself. And we're trying to participate in that as well. One of the new vectors that we're having in graphics right now is that we're trying to have a sort of an academy where we learned a lot from the Disney projects, and we started to teach that to the artists around us, and we're doing master classes. So it's a company effort. It just needs to be something that is more organized, where you start to find animators that are graduated from universities that are already there, start to have own projects. And it is an opportunity, of course, but the support and the fund is not yet coming, but I believe it will be coming in the next years to build a whole ecosystem for animation.
From a business standpoint, I think there's, same things happening in live action. There's just a reset button being hit right now, and it's going to require some patience. This is what's happening in the States. I think it'll eventually land here as well. Until people realize, what budgets will be used and how many projects you're making, there's going to be some turbulence, I think, in the once we get through that, the best story is going to win, and there's an appetite for it from these streaming services to continue to buy.
Discovery is our biggest problem. I mean, there are 500,000 games on the App Store. Go to the App Store and type in zombie. You'll see over 300 zombie games. So getting your game discovered is a huge problem. It's sort of bit like Spotify, right? We've democratized the tool set, and so many people can become creators. And then how you find your audience becomes harder. Building up your community, and so that the dialogue that you talk about establishing via YouTube is a super important approach to take.
Sounds good. Well, I think we'll open things up for questions. We'll go 1, 2, 3. And then we'll take another one over back there. Yeah. Let's start here with this gentleman with the Marvel t-shirt.
Hello. Yeah. First of all, thank you very much, George, and I would like to welcome all the esteemed panelists to Jeddah. I'm a Jeddah-based content creator who focuses on superheroes. Now, I have a question for Mr. Fisher and Mr. Zreik. Back in the 80s in Jeddah, if I wanted a best superhero experience, I would get it from a comic. After that, from an animated series, and last would be Spider-Man, which would be on an Atari game. Have we reached a juncture now that the best superhero storytelling experience is going to come from gaming rather than animation? And Mr. Zreik, you've been involved with Hitmonkey and MODOK, but also live action like The Defenders and Legion. Can we expect you to be doing something like Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, that you would be producing or directing a video game for Marvel fans?
Marvel, no. I'm no longer with Marvel. But I produced all those shows. I was with Marvel Television for 7 years. I don't think you've seen the last of Marvel, obviously.
Right.
They're gonna reboot, and they've got some amazing characters, and they've got a game plan. I think that's what Marvel's always been good at, is laying out the 5 or 10 year game plan. So they're working on that. But to answer your question, no, I'm no longer involved with those.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I love comic books, and still collect and read them. I think the challenge with comics is it's no longer a good vehicle for introducing new characters and new IP. Basically, people just want to experience the old classic characters. There are a few exceptions. Walking Dead was a breakout. But I think the interesting thing about video games is that people are still creating new characters and new heroes and new IP. I would love to see more like an MMO type experience. There's one called City of Heroes, where you can become your own superhero and fly around in a world of superheroes.
Right.
That's the type of thing that I'm looking forward to.
Thank you.
I think we have a question in the second row again.
Hi, this is Abdulaziz Rahman. Thanks for this interesting panel. I'd like to hear the opinions of the panelists on the role for our regional content on a global scale. So animation is very universal. I believe it travels more than music, more than live action, more than anything else. It has universality embedded in it. With creators coming from all over the world, with the competitive landscape we're seeing, and with the democratization of content creation coming from AI, we will see floods and floods of content coming from all over the world. So how can we as regional producers have room in this competitive global landscape?
Look, I agree with everything you just said. I agree with it. I think for me, as a producer, just having been doing this a long time, it's the best story worldwide, right? And unfortunately, there's 500 stories being pitched. 20 will make it through, you know what I mean? But everything you just said about universal appeal and finding the connective tissue between the region and the world, yes, 100%. Find that project, create that project. On top of that, as a producer or a writer, I don't know what you do, but be bold, be daring, push the envelope, do things that we haven't seen before, and that will at least get you noticed, right? That will at least bring attention to the region. Last point, if 30 people are making a specific type of project, go this way. Do it differently, right? Set yourself apart. And that's the advice I have. I think there's a lot of folks that follow, don't follow. Lead the other way, is my advice.
There's a Japanese phrase called Niban Senji, which means the second cup of tea from the same tea bag. And so it's like the same thing. Hey, somebody made this that was successful, and I'm going to make one that's like it. The second cup of tea is never quite the same. So I agree with you. Do something crazy that's an original rather than a weaker version of something that's.
I was going to say the Japanese quote, but I can't. So much question.
From a local director, I agree. This is what we're trying to do, is that we're trying to specialize, to have a niche and specialize. We're kind of specializing now in social impact entertainment, and not just entertainment. You know, we're creating films, we're creating series, but we're also creating something that's needed globally, which is, for instance, with Celine focuses on mental health. We've created, along with Celine, a curriculum and study guides and a series. We've created this subscription-based website that understands this is another also revenue stream where we sell license to use for organizations who work with vulnerable children around the world. We're dubbing it into multiple languages, we're marketing it around the world. And so this is a niche. We're using animation, of course, and the stories that we're telling in Celine to create something that not just streams or that can be used in theaters, but also can be used in schools and centers and organizations working with children to reach a wider audience.
Sounds good. Forward. I saw a question in the fourth row. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Incredible panel. My question is regarding streaming, actually. I'm a huge gamer, and I know like you have Fallout coming out, you have The Witcher, you have The Last of Us, and these successful video game franchises. But I think the recent news I heard was about Rockstar Games putting the Grand Theft Auto series on Netflix, the actual video game series. So I'm curious, in the Grand Theft Auto 6 trailer coming out, and there's just this huge kind of influx of gaming and the community of gaming really being part of interactive media per se. How do you think that with these streamers getting into the gaming industry and into video games in general, animation even to a point, how do you think that's going to affect the industry as a whole globally?
It's still up in the air. The track record of movie studios and TV studios making video games is pretty bad. Right? Disney has jumped in and jumped out. Warner Brothers has been pretty successful with their Harry Potter games, but that's, still remains to be seen how they'll do in the long term. What's fascinating for me, as someone who's been in games for so long, we've always been treated as second-class citizens by Hollywood. And they're like, hey, we're gonna make the movie and then we'll license you the game, don't screw it up. And now, the script has been flipped, and they're having to rely on the video game industry as a source of inspiration for their shows. And it's really, it's nice to see. We're finally getting some of the respect we deserve. The ones I'm really interested in is obviously Netflix now has created their own game division inside. So they're going to start trying to co-create games and streaming together. And they use a metric called, basically it's days of engagement. They don't need to make money from the games that you play on Netflix. Just logging in every day and keeping your subscription alive, that retention is good enough for them. And so it's a whole new business model. So I think I'm excited about that because, for example, today, if you make a mobile video game, unless it can be a free-to-play game with microtransactions, you won't be successful. And it means so many great video game ideas never get made because you can't shoehorn it into that business model. So I think especially what Netflix is doing, if they do it well, could open up a whole new genre of games and open this up to a whole new audience of game players around the world. Time will tell.
I saw there's a final question in the third row, two gentlemen with the glass. Says, yeah, we'll take another couple after that.
My name is Hassan from Brighton's House. I'm from since Halo and Fallout will come soon. Actually, I'm interested in the Fallout and Halo plot, but I never played the game. How to decide the thin line of oh yes, I'm excited. Actually, I know the game. I played the game, and what the hell is going on?
Great question.
Yeah, because to me, this is the problem with the Marvel movies, right? The original stories, right? Iron Man, Captain America, incredible stories that engaged me, right? By the time I'm watching Endgame, I need a notebook to help me understand what's going on because I think they lost that simplicity. So I think games will face that as well. The Last of Us on HBO was a great example where you didn't even have to know that it was a video game, and you could get engaged in that story because it was a great story. Halo is a great example of the risks because in the Halo games, the main character never takes off his helmet. And in the game world, all the other soldiers are afraid of these Spartan-class soldiers because they've never seen their face. And in the TV series, they're like, well, you need to see the actor's face for emotion. So in the first episode, the helmet comes off. And they ruined 15 years of the mythology because some producers said, oh, you need to see their face. So my point of view, they ruined my baby. Because I worked on Halo 2 and Halo 3, and it's one of my favorite projects. So it really broke my heart. I think Fallout will be better. But you're absolutely right, you have to be inviting. My experience has been so far mixed.
Okay, we have 3 more minutes. We have 2 young ladies in the front row. Can we get both of them to ask their questions back to back, and then we see what we get.
Hello, this is Dina, I'm executive producer and a director. And because from Egypt, I want to ask Ahmed about something. How did you get the opportunity to work with Disney? How did you prepare for it? Or how did you pitch for it? And also another question, since it was done perfectly, are you willing to do something for the region or for the area that's similar to Disney? Thank you.
The Disney project was an invite-only pitch that they approached specific studios in Africa, and we were lucky to be one of these studios. 76 African director and creator, they started to pitch their stories, and they pitched one of our stories, and then we got another one to produce, so we produced 2 episodes. How did this happen? How did we prepare for this? It's a long, after the session I will tell you more about it, but we started to learn. We had this mentality. Every meeting I had with the Disney team or the Triggerfish team, I'm telling them, guys, we're here to learn. We have an open mind and we want to learn. So we do mistakes, and it's part of our values. One of our values, we make mistakes and mistakes make us. So we don't afraid to commit that or admit that we did some mistakes. But how did this come? This is my first time to leave. Because I worked on the Grand Night for 5 years, and I kept working, and suddenly I got an email from Triggerfish who liked the Grand Night. They told me, we have a pitch for Disney, and you have to pitch for Disney. And it just started to work this way. So the way I see it is that every artist and every filmmaker, every day you have to try to seek and hustle and try to do what you can do. And the gates will only open. I didn't have it in my 5 years plan to work with Disney, or 10 years, and sometimes it was something that it's just a dream that I don't think it will happen, and just happened. And right now I finished the 2 movies with Disney, and I'm planning for things that are coming in the region. Of course, we're having the Grand Night I told you about, and there's another movie called Cleo for Barry Cook, the director of Mulan. We're doing about it's the young Cleopatra story that's told about young Cleopatra. It's really interesting production design, and we're working on that. And there's a couple of other IPs that are more of local here in Saudi Arabia. We're doing something with King Salman Institute for Arabic Language. So it's focused more for the Arabic children to know the value of the Arabic language. So every IP that we're working on have a specific target. And thank you for the questions.
We'll do one very quick final one.
Hello, thank you so much for this panel. To be quick, I can ask some questions, but it's just like, what advice would you give for young people that are getting into the animation industry, especially in this region, and the game industry? Plus, like you mentioned, animation and video games do take a lot of time. So how do you make sure that like you reach the end of your goal?
I'm going to repeat this so you hear it.
Well, again, I think if you're making games in Saudi Arabia, there are more resources and support available for young people here than probably anywhere else in the world right now. There, Savvy Gaming Studio, which is owned by the Public Investment Fund, runs incubators. They're investing in educational programs. So they're great local things here. I have to put out a good word for my university, USC Games, has a 4-year undergraduate and 2-year Master of Fine Arts program. I think you can get assets through the consulate here through the EdUSA program. There are other great educational programs as well that will teach you the formal process of making games. But at the end of the day, you just gotta go make it. And most projects don't fail because they're bad, they fail because people run out of steam and quit along the way. Like your story, it takes a lot of perseverance. And you really have to love and be dedicated with what you do. If you have that grit, you can overcome any other kind of challenge.
So it's just do it, right?
And don't quit.
Well, unfortunately, we have to quit talking up here and send everybody home. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you so much for the panelists for sharing their insights.